The smell of motor oil and betrayal hung thick in my garage that night. I was flat on my back under Mrs. Henderson's busted Camry, wrench in hand, when Natalie's voice cut through the birthday party noise like a rusty blade. "Brad's too busy playing with his little toys to join the adults," she announced to her gaggle of friends. The laughter that followed felt like nails on a chalkboard. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I'd been married to Natalie for 8 years. 8 years of watching her climb the real estate ladder while treating me like the help. Tonight was her 36th birthday, and apparently, I was the entertainment. Where is he anyway? That was Derek's voice. Derek fucking Martinez, the gym owner who'd been sniffing around my wife like a dog in heat. His voice had that smug tone that made me want to introduce his face to my toolbox. "Oh, you know Brad," Natalie replied, and I could practically hear her eye roll. Always finding excuses to avoid real conversation, probably afraid someone might ask him about his business. She said business like it was a dirty word. My business. The HVAC repair shop I'd built from nothing. The same shop that paid for her fancy clothes and kept the lights on in our overpriced suburban house. But to Natalie and her circle of fake-tanned vultures, I was just the grease monkey who didn't fit their Instagram aesthetic. I slid out from under the Camry and wiped my hands on an old rag. Through the garage window, I could see them gathered on our deck. Natalie held court in the center, her blonde hair perfectly styled, wearing that red dress I'd bought her for Christmas. Derek stood close enough to smell her perfume, his gym-sculpted arms crossed like he owned the place. Jessa Kim, Natalie's best friend and self-proclaimed social media influencer, was recording everything on her phone. Because nothing happened in Jessa's world unless it was documented for her 3,000 followers. "Maybe we should get him," suggested Brian Walsh, Natalie's sleazy boss from Premier Properties. "It's rude to hide during your wife's party." "Trust me," Natalie laughed. "Brad doesn't do well in social situations. He's more comfortable with machines than people. Isn't that right, honey?" She'd spotted me in the doorway. Every face turned toward me, and I felt like a specimen under a microscope. My work clothes were stained, my hands still dirty despite the rag. I looked exactly like what I was, a working man who'd just put in 12 hours fixing other people's problems. "Just finishing up Mrs. Henderson's car," I said, forcing a smile. "You know how it is. Some of us actually work for a living." The silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. Derek's smirk widened. Jessa kept filming. "Work?" Natalie's voice dripped with condescension. "Is that what you call hiding in the garage while your wife entertains guests? While I'm out there building a real career, making real money?" "Real money?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "Who do you think pays the mortgage when your real estate commissions don't cover it? Who fixed the air conditioning when it broke during that heat wave? Who—" "Oh, please," Natalie interrupted, waving her wine glass dismissively. "Your little repair shop barely keeps us afloat. If it wasn't for my career, we'd be living in a trailer park." The laughter from her friends hit me like a slap. Derek actually chuckled and shook his head, like I was some pathetic joke he couldn't believe. "You're right," I said quietly, and something in my tone made the laughter stop. "You're absolutely right, Natalie." I walked back into the garage, grabbed my keys from the workbench, and headed for my truck. Behind me, I heard Natalie calling my name, but I didn't stop. I didn't look back. Marty's bar was exactly what you'd expect from a dive in our faded Midwest suburb. Neon beer signs, sticky floors, and the kind of regulars who minded their own business. Marty Kowalski had been running the place since high school, and he'd been my best friend even longer. "Rough night?" he asked, sliding a beer across the bar without being asked. "Birthday party," I said, taking a long pull from the bottle. "Natalie's." Marty nodded, like that explained everything. He'd met my wife exactly twice, and both times she'd made it clear that bartenders weren't worth her time. She's been different lately, I continued. More, I don't know, cruel, I guess, like she's trying to push me away. Maybe she is, Marty said, polishing a glass. Question is, why? I thought about Derek's smug face, the way he'd stood so close to my wife, the way Natalie had lit up when he laughed at her jokes, the way she'd barely looked at me in weeks. I think I know why, I muttered. When I got home at 2 a.m, the house was dark. Empty wine bottles and dirty plates covered the kitchen counter. I cleaned up in silence, then crashed on the living room couch. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Natalie's heels clicking across the hardwood floor. She was dressed for work, her real estate blazer pristine, her makeup flawless. "We need to talk," she said, not looking at me. "Do we?" "You humiliated me last night, walking out of my own birthday party like some sulking child. Do you have any idea how that looked?" I sat up, running a hand through my hair. "How it looked? That's what you're worried about?" "Image matters, Brad. Reputation matters. In my business, perception is everything." "Your business," I repeated. "Right, the business that's so much more important than your marriage." She finally looked at me then, and I saw something cold in her eyes, something that hadn't been there when we'd first met, when she was just a small-town girl with big dreams, and I was the guy who believed in her. "Maybe it is," she said quietly. The words hung between us like a death sentence. I waited for her to take them back, to apologize, to show some hint of the woman I'd fallen in love with. Instead, she grabbed her purse and headed for the door. "I'm showing houses all day," she said. "We'll talk tonight." But I knew we wouldn't. Not really. Because sometime between last night and this morning, I'd realized that my marriage was already over. The only question now was how it would end. I was in the garage, working on a transmission rebuild, when I heard Natalie's phone buzzing on the workbench. She'd left it behind in her rush to get to work. The screen lit up with a text notification. "Derek, last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about you." My hands stilled on the wrench. The phone buzzed again. "Derek, when can I see you again? I need to touch you." Another buzz. "Jessa, did you see my story? The footage of Brad's meltdown is going viral. This is perfect timing." I stared at the screen, feeling something cold and sharp settle in my chest. Not surprise, exactly. I'd suspected. But seeing it confirmed, seeing the casual cruelty of it, the way they were all in on it together. The phone buzzed one more time. "Derek, your husband looked pathetic last night. You deserve so much better, baby." I set the phone down carefully, like it might explode. Then I walked to my toolbox and pulled out my heaviest wrench. For a moment, I imagined bringing it down on Derek's smug face, imagined the satisfying crunch of bone and cartilage, but that would be too easy, too quick. No, if they wanted to play games, I'd show them how a real player operated. They thought I was just some dumb grease monkey who didn't understand their sophisticated world of social media and image management. They were about to learn how wrong they were. I put the wrench back and picked up Natalie's phone again. This time, I started taking screenshots. 3 days after discovering my wife's betrayal, I was still playing the oblivious husband. It was easier than I'd expected. Natalie was so caught up in her affair that she barely noticed I existed, and when she did acknowledge me, it was with the kind of patronizing patience you'd show a slow child. "Brad, honey," she said over breakfast, not looking up from her phone. "I'm going to be working late again tonight. Big client meeting." "Sure thing," I replied, buttering my toast. "Which client?" The question caught her off guard. She actually looked at me, probably wondering if I suspected something. The Hendersons," she said finally. "They're looking at that property on Oak Street." I nodded and took a bite of toast. The Hendersons were our neighbors. They'd lived in the same house for 30 years and had no intention of moving. But Natalie didn't know I knew that. Tell them I said hi, I said. She relaxed, gave me that fake smile she'd perfected for difficult customers. Of course, sweetie. After she left, I called in sick to work and drove to the gym where Derek spent his days flexing for bored housewives and college girls. Fit Life Premium was exactly the kind of place you'd expect, all chrome and mirrors and motivational posters about crushing your goals. Derek was easy to spot. 6'2", spray-tanned, wearing a tank top that showed off his steroid-enhanced muscles. He was training a middle-aged woman who hung on his every word like he was revealing the secrets of the universe instead of explaining how to use a leg press. I watched him for an hour, taking notes, his routine, his clients, his habits. Knowledge was power, and I was building an arsenal. That evening, I was back in my garage when Mrs. DeWitt knocked on the door. She was 73, lived alone since her husband died, and knew everyone's business in a 6-block radius. "Evening, Brad," she said, holding a plate of cookies. "Thought you might be hungry." Mrs. DeWitt's cookies were legendary, but I knew she wasn't here for a social call. She had that look in her eye, the look of someone with gossip to share. "Thanks, Mrs. DeWitt. Coffee?" "That would be lovely." We sat in my kitchen, and she got right to the point. "I saw that young man's car in your driveway yesterday," she said. "The one from the gym, Derek something." I kept my expression neutral. "Oh? When was that?" "Around 2 o'clock. Natalie's car was here too. I thought it was odd, since you were at work." "Probably some real estate thing," I said. "Natalie's always meeting clients." Mrs. DeWitt nodded, but her eyes said she wasn't buying it. "Of course. Though it's strange how many clients she's been meeting at the house lately." After she left, I sat in the dark kitchen, processing what I'd learned. Derek had been in my house, in my bed, probably. The thought made my hands shake with rage, but rage was unproductive. I needed to be smart about this. The next morning, I was waiting outside Fit Life when Derek arrived in his black BMW. He'd parked in his usual spot, right up front where everyone could see his vanity plates. Fitking. I waited until he was inside, then walked over to his car with a small screwdriver. Nothing dramatic, just a tiny hole in each tire, small enough that they'd deflate slowly over the course of the day. Then I went to work and pretended everything was normal. That afternoon, Marnie called me at the shop. "You need to see this," he said. "Jessa posted something about you on her Instagram." I pulled up her account on my phone. There it was, a video from Natalie's party, showing me walking out. The caption read, "When your husband can't handle adult conversation, your drama, your marriage problems, your upgrade." The comments were brutal. People I'd known for years, calling me everything from loser to deadbeat. Strangers who'd never met me weighing in on my marriage, my appearance, my worth as a man. But the worst part was seeing Natalie's response in the comments. "Thanks for the support, girl. Some people never grow up." I screenshotted everything, adding it to my growing collection of evidence. Then I did something I'd never done before. I created my own social media accounts. Not to post, but to watch. To learn how their world worked. It was fascinating, in a sick way. Jessa's entire life was performed for an audience of strangers. Every meal, every outfit, every thought was content to be consumed and judged. She had 3,000 followers who hung on her every word, and she wielded that influence like a weapon. Natalie was learning from her. Her own account had grown from a few dozen followers to over 1,000 in the past month. She posted constantly now, selfies at work, motivational quotes about knowing your worth, photos of expensive dinners that I knew damn well I wasn't paying for. And Derek's account was a masterclass in narcissism. Shirtless gym selfies, motivational videos about alpha mindset, and photos of his BMW with captions about success attracting success. These people lived in a fantasy world where image was everything and substance meant nothing. They thought they were playing chess while I was playing checkers. They had no idea I was playing an entirely different game. Friday night, Natalie announced she was going out with Jessa. "Girls' night," she said, applying lipstick in the hallway mirror. "We're trying that new wine bar downtown." I knew she was lying. I'd been tracking Derek's social media, and he'd posted about being at Russo's, an upscale restaurant on the other side of town, the kind of place that required reservations and charged $30 for a steak. After she left, I drove to Russo's and parked across the street. Sure enough, there was Derek's BMW in the valet area. And there, through the window, I could see my wife laughing at something he was saying, her hand resting on his arm. They looked happy, relaxed, like a real couple. I sat in my truck for 2 hours watching them, watching my wife be more animated and alive than she'd been with me in months. When they finally left, Derek's hand was on the small of her back, guiding her toward his car. I followed them to a hotel, the Marriott downtown, the one with the expensive suites and the discreet staff. I watched Derek hand his keys to the valet, watched them walk into the lobby like they owned the place. That's when I made my decision. If Natalie wanted to play games, I'd give her a game she'd never forget. But first, I needed allies. Saturday morning, I drove to the auto parts store on the south side of town. It was the kind of place where real mechanics shopped, not the chain stores that catered to weekend warriors. Tommy Richie had worked there for 15 years, and he knew every car guy in the county. "Brad," he called out when I walked in. "Haven't seen you in a while. How's business?" "Can't complain," I said, grabbing a coffee from the pot by the register. "Actually, I need a favor." Tommy raised an eyebrow. "What kind of favor?" "Information. You know Derek Martinez? Owns FitLife Premium? The steroid monkey with the BMW? Yeah, I know him. Brings his car in for detail work every week. Why?" I took a sip of coffee, choosing my words carefully. "Let's just say I'm curious about his financial situation." Tommy grinned. "Curious, huh? Well, let me tell you something about Mr. FitLife. That fancy gym of his? It's hemorrhaging money. He's 3 months behind on his lease, owes money to half the suppliers in town. The only reason he's still open is because he's been borrowing against his car." "Borrowing against the BMW?" "Yep. Title loan. Desperate man's move. Word is he's looking for investors, but nobody's biting. Turns out, paying rent with Instagram followers doesn't work so well." This was better than I'd hoped. Derek wasn't the successful businessman he pretended to be online. He was a fraud, just like the rest of them. "Thanks, Tommy. I owe you one." "Just remember me when you need parts," he said with a wink. My next stop was the courthouse. Public records were a beautiful thing. Anyone could access them if they knew where to look. It took me 3 hours, but I found what I was looking for. Derek Martinez had been sued twice in the past year, once by a former business partner, once by a client who'd been injured using faulty equipment at his gym. Both cases had been settled out of court, but the paperwork told a story of a man living beyond his means. Natalie's records were even more interesting. She'd been written up twice by the State Real Estate Commission for misrepresenting property conditions. Not enough to lose her license, but enough to raise questions about her ethics. And Jessa was a goldmine of legal troubles. 3 complaints filed with the Better Business Bureau for fraudulent advertising related to her influencer marketing. Apparently, she'd been promoting products she'd never used and keeping the money when followers couldn't get refunds. These people weren't just cheating on me, they were cheating everyone. I spent the weekend building my strategy. If they wanted to destroy me publicly, I'd return the favor. But I'd be smarter about it, more thorough. Monday morning, I created an anonymous email account and sent a detailed complaint to the State Real Estate Commission about Natalie's recent activities. I included screenshots of her social media posts showing her at expensive restaurants during work hours, along with documentation of properties she'd claimed to show but never actually visited. Then I sent similar complaints to Jessa's sponsors, complete with evidence of her fraudulent advertising practices. The beauty of the internet age was that everything left a trail if you knew where to look. For Derek, I took a more direct approach. I printed out copies of his legal troubles and left them in the lobbies of every apartment complex and office building in town. Not illegal, just public information, made more public. Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. It was Natalie, and she was furious. "What the hell did you do?" she screamed. "I'm at work," I said calmly. "What are you talking about?" "Someone reported me to the state commission. They're launching an investigation." "That's terrible," I said, not bothering to hide the satisfaction in my voice. "I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding." "Don't play dumb with me, Brad. I know this was you." "Really? How would I even know how to file a complaint with the real estate commission? I'm just a simple mechanic, remember?" The silence stretched between us. I could practically hear her brain working, trying to figure out how to prove what she knew I'd done. "This isn't over," she said finally. "No," I agreed. "It's not." That evening, Derek showed up at my house. I was in the garage working on an engine rebuild when I heard his BMW pull into the driveway. He slammed the car door hard enough to rattle the windows. "We need to talk," he said, filling the doorway with his bulk. I looked up from the engine block, wrench in hand. "About what?" "You know damn well what. Someone's been spreading lies about me around town, hurting my business." "That's terrible," I said, echoing my conversation with Natalie. "What kind of lies?" His face was red, veins bulging in his neck. "Court documents, financial records, private information." "Doesn't sound like lies if they're court documents," I pointed out. "Sounds like facts." He took a step toward me, hands clenched into fists. "You think you're smart, don't you? You think you can mess with me?" I stood up slowly, still holding the wrench. I was 6 inches shorter than Derek, but I'd been working with my hands my whole life. My strength was real, earned through years of honest labor, not pumped up with chemicals and ego. "I think you should leave," I said quietly. "Or what? You'll hit me with that wrench?" "No," I said, setting the tool down on the workbench. "I'll call the police and report you for trespassing and threatening behavior. Then I'll post the video on social media." He looked confused. "What video?" I nodded toward the corner of the garage, where a small security camera was mounted. "The one that's been recording this whole conversation. Amazing what you can get at the electronics store these days." Derek's face went pale. He looked from me to the camera and back again. "You're crazy," he muttered. "Maybe," I said, "but I'm not stupid, and I'm not going anywhere." He left without another word, but I knew this was just the beginning. I'd drawn blood, and now they'd fight back with everything they had. I was counting on it. Wednesday morning brought the first real counterattack. I arrived at work to find my boss, Mike Patterson, waiting for me with a grim expression. "Brad, we need to talk," he said, gesturing toward his office. Mike had owned Patterson's auto repair for 23 years. He was a fair man, the kind of boss who remembered his employees' birthdays and never asked them to work for free. Seeing him upset made my stomach clench. "Someone called yesterday," he said, once we were seated. "Anonymous tip that you've been using company tools for side jobs, stealing parts. They said they had proof." "That's bullshit, Mike, and you know it." "I know," he said, holding up a hand. "But I had to look into it. Checked the inventory, reviewed the security footage. You're clean, obviously, but whoever called knew enough about our operation to sound credible." I felt a cold rage building in my chest. "Did they leave a name?" "No, but it was a woman. Young-sounding. Said she was concerned about the company's reputation." Jessa. It had to be. She was escalating, trying to destroy my livelihood. "I'm sorry you had to deal with this, Mike. Don't worry about it. But Brad, be careful. Someone's got it out for you, and they're playing dirty." That afternoon, I got a call from my insurance company. Someone had filed a claim against my homeowner's policy, alleging that I'd damaged their property during a repair job. The claim was bogus. I'd never worked on the address they listed, but it would take weeks to sort out. Then my bank called. Someone had attempted to access my accounts online, using personal information that suggested they knew me well. The attempts had been unsuccessful, but it was another warning shot. They were trying to destroy me systematically. My job, my finances, my reputation. It was a coordinated attack, and I had to admire its thoroughness even as it pissed me off. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd assumed I was a passive victim, someone who would just take their abuse and crumble. They didn't understand that every attack they made gave me more ammunition for my own war. That evening, I put the next phase of my plan into motion. I'd spent hours studying Jessa's social media presence, learning the rhythm of her posts, the language she used, the way she interacted with her followers. She was predictable, like most narcissists. Everything was about image, about maintaining the facade of success and influence. Using a burner phone and a fake email account, I created a dozen social media profiles. Not to impersonate anyone, but to blend into the crowd of anonymous users who populated her comment sections. Then I started asking questions. Hey Jessa, love your content. Quick question. I bought that skincare product you recommended last month, but the company says they've never heard of you. Can you help? Jessa, I'm a small business owner and I'd love to work with you. Can you share your actual engagement metrics? The numbers seem off. Love your lifestyle content. Just curious, how do you afford all this on an influencer salary? Asking for a friend who wants to get into the business. The questions were innocent enough individually, but together they painted a picture of someone whose success was built on lies. Other followers started asking similar questions. Doubt spread like wildfire in the comments. Within 48 hours, 3 of Jessa's sponsors had quietly dropped her. Her follower count began to drop as people realized they'd been scammed. For Derek, I took a more direct approach. I knew from my surveillance that he parked his BMW in the same spot every day, right in front of his gym where everyone could see it. It was his pride and joy, his symbol of success. Thursday night, I waited until the gym closed, then made my move. I didn't damage the car. That would be criminal. Instead, I left a small gift under the windshield wiper. A manila envelope containing copies of all his legal documents, financial troubles, and a printout of his dating profile from 3 different apps. The dating profiles were particularly damning. While he was supposedly in a serious relationship with my wife, Derek was actively pursuing other women online. His profiles were full of lies about his wealth, his business success, and his availability. I made sure to leave copies of everything in the gym's lobby too, along with a simple note. Thought the members should know who they're trusting with their health and money. Friday morning, Derek's BMW was gone from its usual spot. By afternoon, I heard through the grapevine that 3 of his biggest clients had canceled their memberships. Word traveled fast in our small town. But Natalie was the real prize. I'd been saving the best for last. She'd been staying out later every night, barely speaking to me when she was home. The pretense of our marriage was crumbling, but she still hadn't asked for a divorce. I think she was waiting for me to leave first, to be the bad guy who abandoned his wife. That weekend, she announced she was going to a real estate conference in Chicago. 3 days, she said. Professional development. I knew it was another lie. There was no conference. I'd checked. But I played along, even helped her pack. Have fun, I said as she loaded her suitcase into her car. Learn lots. I will, she replied, not meeting my eyes. After she left, I went to work. Not the kind of work she thought I was capable of, but the kind that required patience, intelligence, and attention to detail. I started with her computer. She'd left it behind, probably thinking it was safe in our house. Her password was pathetically easy to guess. Our wedding anniversary, the date she was now actively betraying. Her email account was a treasure trove. Messages from Derek, planning their weekend getaway. Messages from Jessa, strategizing about how to handle the Brad situation. Messages from her boss at the real estate office, warning her about the state investigation. But the real gold mine was her browser history. She'd been researching divorce lawyers, looking up information about asset division, even browsing apartment listings. She was planning her exit strategy, probably had been for months. I copied everything to a secure drive, then covered my tracks. By the time she returned from her fake conference, I'd have enough evidence to bury her in any divorce proceeding. But I wasn't planning to divorce her. I had something much more satisfying in mind. Sunday evening, Natalie returned from Chicago with a fake tan and a guilty conscience. She was jumpy, distracted, constantly checking her phone. "How was the conference?" I asked over dinner. "Good," she said quickly. "Very educational. Learned a lot about market trends." "That's great. What was your favorite session?" The question caught her off guard. The one about, digital marketing. For real estate." I nodded sympathetically. "Sounds boring. I'm glad you're investing in your career, though, even if it means spending time away from home." She relaxed slightly, probably thinking she'd gotten away with it. "Actually," I continued, "I've been thinking about investing in my own future, too. Maybe it's time for some changes around here." "What kind of changes?" I smiled, and something in my expression made her shift uncomfortably in her chair. "You'll see," I said. "I think you're going to be very surprised." The town's annual Labor Day block party was always held on Maple Street, right in the heart of our neighborhood. It was one of those small-town traditions that brought everyone together: families, couples, kids, old-timers who'd lived here their whole lives. There was a makeshift stage for local bands, food trucks, games for the kids, and enough beer to float a battleship. This year, I'd volunteered to help with the sound system. Amazing how helpful people found you when you offered to do the technical work nobody else understood. "You sure you know what you're doing with all this equipment?" asked Jim Morrison, the block party coordinator. No relation to the dead rock star, just a guy who sold insurance and took his volunteer duties very seriously. "Trust me," I said, adjusting the microphone levels. "I've got everything under control." It was 2:00 on a perfect September afternoon. The whole neighborhood was there, plus visitors from other parts of town. I spotted Mrs. DeWitt manning the bake sale table, keeping one eye on the cookies and the other on everyone else's business. Marty had closed his bar early to attend, bringing a cooler of beer and his usual good humor. And there, near the food trucks, stood my wife with her little circle of conspirators. Natalie looked radiant in a sundress that probably cost more than most people's monthly car payment. Derek was beside her, wearing designer jeans and a polo shirt, playing the part of the successful businessman. Jessa fluttered around them with her phone, documenting everything for her rapidly shrinking social media audience. They looked so confident, so sure of themselves, like they'd won some kind of victory. They had no idea what was coming. At 3:00, the local band finished their set, and Jim Morrison took the microphone to introduce the next act. That was my cue. "Actually, Jim," I said, walking onto the stage, "I'd like to say a few words first, if that's okay." Jim looked confused, but handed me the microphone. The crowd quieted down, probably expecting some boring announcement about lost keys or parking violations. "Hi, everyone," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the sound system I'd spent all morning perfecting. "For those who don't know me, I'm Brad Thompson. I've lived in this neighborhood for 8 years, married to Natalie Thompson from Premier Properties." I saw Natalie's head snap up, her face suddenly pale. Derek was frowning, probably wondering where this was going. Jessa had her phone out, recording as always. "I want to talk to you today about truth," I continued. "About the difference between who people pretend to be and who they really are. About what happens when you dig beneath the surface of someone's carefully crafted image." The crowd was fully attentive now. Nothing got a small town's attention like the promise of scandal. Take my wife, for example, beautiful, successful, always perfectly dressed. She's built quite a reputation as a rising star in real estate. But did you know she's currently under investigation by the State Real Estate Commission for fraudulent practices? A murmur went through the crowd. I could see Natalie pushing through people, trying to get to the stage, but the crowd was thick and she was still 50 yards away. Or her friend Jessa Kim, the social media influencer. 3,000 followers, sponsors lining up to work with her, except most of those followers are fake, bought and paid for. And those sponsors? They're dropping her faster than she can delete the evidence. Jessa had stopped recording. Her face was bright red, and she was looking around frantically, probably calculating how fast she could get to her car. And then there's Derek Martinez from FitLife Premium. Successful businessman, luxury car, living the dream. Except his business is 3 months behind on rent. He's facing multiple lawsuits, and that BMW he's so proud of, it's collateral for a title loan. Derek was pushing through the crowd now too, his face twisted with rage. But he was even further away than Natalie, and I wasn't done. Now, you might be wondering why I'm sharing all this personal information about these fine people. Well, it's because they've been sharing personal information about me, on social media, in gossip sessions, in anonymous phone calls to my employer. They've been working very hard to destroy my reputation, my livelihood, my marriage. The crowd was dead silent now. Even the kids had stopped playing, sensing the drama unfolding on stage. See, Derek and my wife have been having an affair for months. Hotel receipts, text messages, romantic dinners, the whole cliché. And Jessa has been helping them, documenting my humiliation for her social media content, even calling my boss with false accusations to try to get me fired. Natalie had finally reached the front of the crowd. "Brad, stop this right now!" she screamed. I looked down at her, this woman I'd loved and supported and believed in for 8 years, this woman who'd repaid my devotion with betrayal and contempt. "Why should I stop, Natalie? You didn't stop when you were fucking Derek in our bed. You didn't stop when you were laughing about me with your friends. You didn't stop when you tried to destroy my career." The crowd gasped. Someone's kid asked loudly, "Mommy, what's fucking?" and was quickly shushed. Derek had finally made it to the stage area. "Get down from there, you crazy bastard," he shouted. "Crazy?" I laughed into the microphone. That's rich, coming from a guy who's been pretending to be successful while borrowing money against his car to keep his failing business afloat. Tell me, Derek, how many of those muscle-building supplements you sell are actually just overpriced protein powder? Derek's face went purple. He actually tried to climb onto the stage, but Jim Morrison and 2 other volunteers blocked his way. "You want to know the really funny part?" I continued, addressing the crowd again. They thought I was too stupid to figure it out. Just a dumb mechanic who wouldn't notice his wife coming home smelling like another man's cologne. Too simple to understand their sophisticated games. I pulled out my phone and held it up. But stupid people don't usually have this much evidence. Hotel receipts, text messages, financial records, dating profiles. Oh yes, Derek, I found all 3 of your dating profiles. Apparently my wife isn't the only married woman you've been pursuing. Natalie was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. "Please, Brad, you're embarrassing yourself." "Embarrassing myself?" I laughed again, and the sound echoed through the speakers. "Natalie, I'm not the one who got caught cheating. I'm not the one under investigation by the state. I'm not the one whose lies are falling apart in front of the entire neighborhood." I looked out at the crowd, seeing faces I'd known for years. Some looked shocked, others sympathetic, a few were clearly enjoying the drama. Mrs. DeWitt was taking notes, probably already planning how to share this story with her network of gossips. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice calm and clear. "Natalie, you're going to pack your things and move out of my house. Today. Derek, you're going to stay away from my wife, my property, and my life, or I'll make sure every gym member in town knows exactly what kind of man you really are. And Jessa, you're going to delete every post, every video, every comment you've made about me, or I'll send your complete financial records to the IRS." "You can't do this!" Natalie screamed. "This is harassment. This is—" This is justice, I interrupted. This is what happens when you underestimate someone, when you mistake kindness for weakness, silence for stupidity. Derek made another lunge for the stage, but this time Marty stepped in his way. My old friend was grinning, clearly enjoying the show. I wouldn't, Marty said quietly. Not unless you want to explain to the police why you're assaulting someone. You think this is over? Derek snarled at me. You think you've won something? I looked down at him, this pathetic man who'd thought he could steal my life, and smiled. Derek, I haven't just won. I've destroyed you. All of you. Your reputations, your businesses, your little fantasy world where you were the heroes and I was the villain. You wanted to play games with a simple mechanic? Well, congratulations. You just learned what happens when the simple mechanic decides to play back. I set the microphone down on its stand and walked off the stage. The crowd parted in front of me like the Red Sea, everyone staring, whispering, pointing. Behind me I could hear Natalie sobbing, Derek cursing, Jessa trying to explain to someone that it was all a misunderstanding. But their voices were fading, becoming just background noise. I walked to my truck, got in, and drove away, leaving behind the wreckage of their carefully constructed lies. In my rearview mirror, I could see them standing in the middle of the crowd, exposed and humiliated, finally revealed for what they truly were. It was the most beautiful sight I'd ever seen. 3 hours later, I was sitting in my empty house, drinking a beer and watching the sunset through my kitchen window. Natalie had come and gone, taking her clothes and her lies with her. She'd tried to apologize, to explain, to somehow make it my fault, but I'd just sat there in silence until she gave up and left. Derek had driven by twice, slowing down like he wanted to stop, but apparently thinking better of it. Jessa's social media accounts had gone dark, all of them. Even her business pages had disappeared. My phone had been ringing constantly. Reporters from the local paper, neighbors wanting details, Marty calling to buy me a drink. I'd ignored them all. The house was quiet now, peaceful in a way it hadn't been for months. I thought about what came next, the divorce proceedings, the division of assets, the process of rebuilding my life. It would be complicated, probably ugly, but I wasn't worried. I'd played their game and won. More than that, I'd shown them, and everyone else, that underestimating someone could be a fatal mistake. They'd called me a loser, a failure, a pathetic excuse for a man. They'd tried to destroy everything I'd worked for, everything I cared about. Instead, they'd created a monster. And that monster had just burned their world to the ground.